Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel where today we are going to address the overpowered premium issue that has seemed to have gotten itself out of hand in recent months. Now, before I start sort of getting onto Wargaming for this in any way at all, I do want to caveat this entire conversation by saying that as of their roadmap article release on their website, they have stated the following: exploring gameplay balance updates, evaluating adjustments to balance between tech tree and premium tanks. One thing I can say is that based on the things I've been hearing from Wargaming recently, it seems to be coming very, very clear to them and very, very apparent to them that the strategy for implementing premiums that they've been using in the recent past and present, I would say, it's not working, and they cannot continue the way they are. So I'm glad to say that they are acknowledging this and they're recognizing that. So this whole video is not really about, hey, this needs to be addressed. This is sort of a response in the conversation, because Wargaming are clearly aware of this problem, and the fact that they're willing to, as they say, explore gameplay balance updates, that's a good thing. It's good that they're addressing this and they're acknowledging this. So first of all, Wargaming, thank you. There were conversations had, things were stated, and you know, you've clearly listened. You've heard what the players were saying. This can't go on, and you're acknowledging that you're going to explore different ways of implementing premium tanks and tech tree tanks for that matter. So thank you for doing that and acknowledging that. Now, the case in point I have today is the Wiesel, and this video has been a while in the making, simply because time had to go by in order for me to gather the evidence before I can make this point. I had a suspicion that this point was going to make itself with time, but in the past I've thought things about this game and I've gone to record a video only to discover that the very thing I was trying to prove wasn't actually happening, and I've had to eat some humble pie. This time I've got the evidence and I'm going to present it to you on screen now. So the screenshots that I'm showing you here, I'm just going to cycle through a whole bunch of screenshots here. These have been captured over the last 2 to 3 months. The Wiesel one in Era 2 came out on October 29th. So we've had November, December, now we're, I want to say halfway through January. So I take that back, not 3 months, 2 months, 2.5 months. We'll just say 2 months. And the trend here is that whenever a Wiesel is in the game, it is almost guaranteed to finish in the top 2. I say almost because in my time playing in the last 2 months, 2.5 months, I've played, from memory, I've played one Era 2 game where a Wiesel was present and it did not finish in the top 2 on either team. So for the most part, if a Wiesel is in the game, it is guaranteed to finish top 2. Why am I using that as the criteria? Well, that was the criteria I used to demonstrate that the armadillo was broken, essentially overpowered and broken, and needed a nerf. Here we are, we're in Era 2, it is January 2025, 2.5 months since the Wiesel 1's release, and it is still finishing top 2. It's not as frequent, you don't see them as much in game as we used to, but we are still seeing that they are dominant when they're in game. So we're at the end of this Mag X6 R Hydra game. I'm going to bump over to the scoreboard in just a second. Here we are, enemy team, Wiesel, second place. And at this point you could say, well, Ricky, you're making a video on this. It's so easy for you to just cherry pick stuff. You could just play a whole bunch of games and just cherry pick the ones where a Wiesel finishes, just to try and make your point. You could be lying to us. It's like, yep, you're right. That is a valid concern. If I were in your shoes, I'd be thinking that a content creator might do exactly the same thing. My defense is go back and watch my live streams. Go back and watch the streams where I'm not cherry picking. The games just happen as they happen, and you'll see several times we start a game, Era 2, there are Wiesels on the enemy team, and I call it at the start of the game. I guarantee a Wiesel will be MVP or second place. You get to the end of the game, and there it is. This is what's happening. And for me, what I would like to see from Wargaming is having these tanks in the game. You know, to an extent, these tanks are here now. And Wargaming is limited to what they can do about these tanks because, you know, people spent real money on them. You can change something that someone bought, but they're not going to be happy about it. There's refunds involved, and how much of a refund do you give people? Blah 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 blah. All that legal stuff, you know. Wargaming have gotten themselves into a bit of a pickle with this one, but really, now that they're acknowledging that they're going to explore balance updates, I would like to weigh in on exactly what that would mean and what that would look like. Back in the day, back in the early days of this game, the concept of premiums wasn't that they would be better than tech tree tanks. Premiums were meant to be enticing to you because they would earn more crew XP or more silver, or they provided a balanced bonus in an area of the game that a tech tree tank wouldn't provide you. They were not meant to be better in any way whatsoever. What's happened with the game, with the Wiesel 1, the ELC, these premiums that we've seen, the 249 in World War II, what we've seen is the emergence of a conversation that never used to be present in this game, and that is the conversation around meta. Back in the early days, premiums were never better than tech tree tanks. On average, premiums were worse. They had worse armor, they had worse gun performance, worse penetration, alpha, whatever it might be. But they had silver bonuses, or they had crew XP bonuses. They were never meant to be better than the tech tree tanks, because the tech tree tanks were the core of the game. That's what the game relied on. Premiums were spend a bit of cash and get some more silver, but you're no better than anybody else in the game. What we've seen recently is the meta conversation emerging, and essentially what that conversation revolves around is, what is the best way of playing a game? What is the best approach to a video game? What weapon setup should I be using that makes me most effective? What loadouts, what kit should I be using? That conversation was never in the game because that was never how the game was meant to be. And that's what's happening now. The meta for Era 2 is the Wiesel 1, or the ELC, or the Big Light Pans, or it was the Big Light Pans, I don't know if it still is. And that conversation is new for World of Tanks, and that is the problem right there in my mind. There shouldn't be a meta at all in this game. It should just be the best way for you to play is what works best for you. So, there we go, end of that game. Wiesel, second, third. That's my point right there. So, Wargaming, if I could weigh in on this, it would be, go back to your roots. Go back to how things used to be. Go back to the classic days of people loving the tech tree tanks, and the premiums were just a bit of a slight bonus. They weren't everything and anything. Wiesel, number 1 on enemy team there. I don't know if you saw that. That's what I would like to see. So if I were weighing on this, if Wargaming will hear me, that's my take on this. Make premiums, go back to the roots. Make premiums what they used to be. Economy boosts. That's what they were meant to be about. We don't want this meta conversation in the game anymore. Well, I don't anyway. Alright guys, that's all I have to say for this one. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave it a like, if not a dislike. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you in the next one.